Hello and welcome to another Guts Editor video tutorial. In this video we're going to be taking an introductory look at chunks. So what I have open here is essentially a dungeon that's been generated, much like a dungeon that would be generated in the game. And you can see that it's a pretty big area. And what I want to show you is the way that the game handles this, the way that the game creates a dungeon, is by taking what's called chunks and placing them together and connecting them to create a larger area. So these chunks are essentially a chunk of a dungeon or a level. So if I go ahead and select one of these folders here, you can see this pops up, and if I grab this, I can actually move this whole piece of the dungeon off. And the reason for that is because this area right here is a chunk. So I just wanted to show you this quick visual representation of what's going on. Basically, when the game creates a level, it's either going to randomly create a set of chunks that connect to each other and then pull these layout files and connect them all together to create a large area, or you can explicitly define a way for different chunks to connect to each other and get a less random result. So the next thing I would like to do, now that we've seen a visual representation of what an actual chunk in game looks like, I'd like to show you where this happens. So if you open up your level rule sets editor, which I already have open here, this is where you're going to define how your level picks its different chunk types and the way that they work in the game. Now I'm going to select Ocean Waste here, and we're going to go over the level rule set editor in the next video, but I need to show you this so that we can understand chunks. So what we have here is a list of the chunk types that are available for this level or this dungeon. You can see that they have this common naming convention, a 1x1 defining the size of the chunk. It's a 1x1 chunk, and a descriptive name followed by some sort of polar coordinate, whether it's north, east, south, or west, and possibly additional descriptive names added onto that. Now, the north, east, south, and west, what that has to do with is the exit on that chunk type. And what the exits do is it lets the game know where this chunk can connect to another chunk. And if you open up your layout, you'll see these boxes here. And if I click on the layout, it'll open up a grid. And what these boxes are, these are actually the chunks that we're talking about. Each one of these boxes is a chunk. And these smaller purple boxes inside are the connectors I was talking about. So for instance, this piece here in the corner, this would be a east-south because it has an exit on the east side and on the south side. If you right-click on one of these boxes, it'll pop up a list of all the available chunk types for this particular level. And if you click one, it'll add it to this layout. And then if you go to connect, it's actually intelligent, and it'll only pop up the chunk types that you can connect to this one that we just placed. So I'm going to go ahead and take that one off. In addition to the north, south, east, and west, there's other types of chunks. For instance, this one here, this entrance chunk, basically what this means is that this chunk is a starting area, and it'll contain a starting point for the player. So when you take a portal from the overworld and enter a dungeon, the first chunk you're in is an entrance chunk. And there will be exit chunks as well, and that's where the portal out of the dungeon is going to be located. And we'll take a look at this later, but you can define whether or not a level requires an exit, and that's where the exit chunks come into play. Then we have some other stuff here like concave and convex, which basically just describe what kind of room it is, and open means that it has a exit on every side, I believe. And there's different kinds of chunk types, and as you mess around with these, you'll be able to figure out what they all mean. So back in the layout tab here, this is where you can explicitly define how these chunks connect. And you can create multiple layouts, as you can see. And when this level is generated, if these layouts are defined, it'll pick from one of these layouts and it'll set it up. And basically what it does is it looks at these chunk types, and then it goes to the directory where the chunk layouts are held, and it'll load from that directory a layout for that particular chunk type. And the way that this works is, let's see, if you come back to the chunk type tab, if you press this button here, open folder, this is actually going to open the folder where all of these chunk types are located. And actually, to see where everything's located, if you go to your Torchlight 2 media folder, everything's located in this layout directory. So if you open the layouts, you'll see all these different zones that you can look in. So for instance, if you open up the vault zone or vault folder, you'll see these names again of the chunk types that we just talked about. So in this chunk type window, when you tell this dungeon that it can choose from these chunk types, it's going to include that entire folder that has to do with that name. So actually, I suppose I should open up the Act 2 Zone 1 folder, since that's where the Ocean Waste is located. And we'll be able to see that these folders coincide with the chunk types that are listed here. So now if I open one of these folders up, you're going to see these layout files here, and you'll actually see that there's three different layouts in this one chunk type. And that's because within this chunk type folder, it's telling the game that it can select any of these three layouts to put in that chunk type. So these are the folders where the layouts are contained, and when the game starts up, or rather when the level is generated, it looks at these chunk types, and it'll load a layout from that chunk types folder that we just took a look at here. I should also note that these chunk type folders are relative to the rule set path. So for instance, we're in the Ocean Wastes rule set, and the Ocean Waste rules file is located in the Act 2 Z1 directory, which means that its chunk types should also be located in the Act 2 Z1 directory. And you'll see here's all the chunk types, but also if I scroll down here, we'll find the Ocean Waste rules. You can see that right there. So when you create a dungeon, if you're going to be doing custom chunks and layouts and whatnot, your rule set is going to go into a directory in your layouts directory. And then inside of this directory, you're going to have your rules file, as well as your folders that contain your different chunk types, and inside of these folders for your different chunk types will be your layout files that have to do with that particular chunk type. So this may seem a little bit confusing at first, but if you look around in the editor, it'll start to make more sense if you look at what you have going on. You have your chunk types defined, and inside of your layout you can set up how they're connected and see how they're connected. And then what the game does is it takes this layout and looks at the chunk type and then loads one of the layouts from that chunk type folder. Now you don't have to define a layout. You can leave it empty and the game will randomly piece together chunks and then load those layouts to create a level. So that's pretty much it for this video. I do also want to show you that you can open these layouts, and if you want to see how they look, you can come down to your layout and go to File, Open, and what you're going to want to do is in your media folder you will navigate to Layouts, and you can pick whatever you want to pick. I'm going to grab Vault and then select the chunk type folder. So I'll do this first one here, and then you can select a layout, and this will open up that layout for this particular chunk type. So you can see here that this is one of the layouts for the chunk type 1x1 East inside of the Vault directory. In the next video, we're going to be taking a closer look at the level rule set editor, and we're going to be seeing how to use these chunks when we're setting up our dungeon. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.